What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new 361 Degrees AG5. Let's get into them. And thanks to 361 Degrees for sending me a pair of these to check out. However, this video is by no means sponsored, and all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, as always, are all my own. All right, so most of you know my thoughts on the AG4. I thought that was one of the most underrated shoes of the year, especially just even for me when I went back to go do my top 5 lists. I kind of feel like even I overlooked it sometimes, but in terms of protection, launch, just really everything, it really was really a great shoe. So I was really looking forward to the 5 to see if they could live up to it. And there's some good, there's some comparable, and there's some different to the AG4, so this stuff you gotta know. So getting into the uppers, man, these things are just substantial. Number one, you've got these quasi-outrigger lace eyelets. You do get quite the good lockdown, and the longest shoestrings I've ever seen in my life. I swear half the weight in these shoes are from shoelaces. So you can cut those a little bit if you want to put a little plastic, some shrink plastic on there, you can shorten the laces. The tongue on these things, a little bit more padded and substantial than we're used to seeing with 361 degree shoes, which is very nice to see. So lace irritation, really none. And also heel slippage on these things, really none to speak of. You go around the ankle collar, and right at the heel counter portion of it, you got a double heel counter in terms of padding, which is absolutely fantastic. You also have a double heel counter in terms of there is pretty thin external heel counter that goes all the way from the medial arch all the way around the heel counter, all the way to the lateral arch for more of a stabilizer laterally, and that kind of goes up into almost like a wing that goes all the way proximal into the ankle where the midfoot meets the hindfoot, which is absolutely fantastic for containment. Thing is, because they are such a substantial upper with so much backing and reinforcement, this paneling in the forefoot I didn't even get to yet, they do heat up a little bit on the breathability test. They do heat up 131.7 degrees. On the breathability mapping, there's some fog getting out of her kind of around the tongue in those areas, but the forefoot of the shoe, and kind of going around the shoe, it is meant more for containment. I will say I never really felt like, sopping wet in these shoes. I didn't feel like I was getting super hot in them. Like I said, the materials do handle heat pretty well. The gusset of these does have, actually, it does get quite porous, right? More superior to the glabrous junction of your foot. The glabrous junction is where the plantar skin or the bottom skin of your foot meets the dorsal skin or the top skin. So kind of right superior to that, right above that. That's where the gusset, it does get very, very porous. So I think maybe that's why I wasn't feeling super bogged down in them, because they do breathe pretty well right there, and that's where all the fog was getting out too. So there is that. If you look at this thing on the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, yeah, I mean, this waxy paneling, the burr makes its way through there, it doesn't make its way through anywhere else. There is exposed foam there, and like I said, the tread is pretty thin, although the durometer is pretty high. So we'll get to these on outdoor courts, but in terms of dragging or sliding on indoors, yeah, they should be just fine. All right, but getting in the midsole teardown, this is kind of where the 5s really diverge from the 4s. Now, you do get a really big slab in the rear foot of that CQT Extreme foam. Now, this is what I actually saw on 361's website. I'm actually looking at some of their super feather light super shoes. This is actually CO2 infused nylon foam. So this is pretty bouncy. It actually feels really lively, especially when you come down on your heels. The rest of the shoe is this Energex foam, which it feels really pillowy, like Cushlon 3.0 does, but you look at it on the microscope, it's definitely much more plasticky of a foam, right? So it definitely has some pop to it, but it does feel really pillowy underneath of it. Then there's kind of that standard carrier foam, especially in the forefoot underneath that wraps all the way around the shoe. The crazy part about this midsole though is the shank. Now, it looks plastic. On their website, it says that it's carbon infused or carbon fiber infused. I believe them, because this thing was ridiculous to get through. I mean, this was one of the hardest shanks I've ever had to get through. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, this looks like just a little plastic shank. It is not. It is, number one, super thick. And then, like I said, there is, carbon fiber infused in there. You can kind of see it. I mean, there is definitely something sandwiched there in the middle of that shank. And that does extend all the way into the forefoot as 2 little leaflet prongs. Now look at the setup on the bounce height test. Got 36 centimeters in the rear foot, 33 in the forefoot. That's kind of what I thought it was going to be, like I said, because that slab of CQT foam in the rear foot, yeah, it feels like I said, when you come down your heels, it definitely feels like there's some rebound there. The rest of the shoe though, like I said, feels just a little bit more pillowy. It's a little bit different than the 4s. Yeah, it feels protective. It just feels different, right? Like I said, a little bit more, like I said, almost like memory foam pillow in the forefoot. The thing that's given this thing the launch and the feelings of launch, because it does have feelings of snap to it, it's the shank, right? It is this shank. And it's the fact that shank meets directly up with that, plastic frame that goes all the way around the shoe. So the whole thing is kind of like this harness, right? That is just kind of just meant for launch. So yeah, different, but similar midsole, kind of accomplishes a lot of the same goals, just like I said, in a different way. All right, but getting into the outsole tread, this is kind of like a flowering triangular pattern in the forefoot, and then it's basically just some, it's more of a radial pattern in the rear foot. Then it kind of gets, broken up ovals around the shoe. Honestly, with this really thin rubber, the actual pattern to me isn't as important, right? As long as there's some break points in it. You look at it on the grip test ramp, 38 degrees of slippage, which, is just kind of middle of the road. Look at it on the viewing box, not a ton of rubber movement there. But what I thought was interesting is that the same day that I had these, I had the Puma All Pro Nitro Elites, which I thought were going to have this crazy grip, and they were really going to outperform these ones on this court here. And on the day I filmed here, these ones were gripping much better than the All Pro Nitro Elites, especially kind of when I was like extending my foot, kind of not using all of the tread. And for harder durometer rubber, it was nice to see. These didn't pick up a ton of dust either, but these definitely had a little bit better traction on a court that's maybe not a perfectly well-maintained indoor hardwood court. Now look at these things on the speed ratio, coming in at 2.07, shank score of 0.3, extremely well earned. Bumps that up to a 2.37. The problem with the speed ratio is that, yeah, it does take into consideration the shank, but in something like this shoe, I just don't think you can overstate how well this shank does and how much it gives you back. The more you give it, the more it will give you, right? So I think for coast-to-coast speed, as well as getting up into the air over and over and over again, as well as for kind of like quick step backs, quick pivot steps, things like that, it's out of this world, especially like Euro stepping, things like that. You can just bound down the court with these things. So in terms of coast-to-coast speed, these are, like the AG4s, extremely, extremely effective. Like this thing on the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Yeah, I mean, not even a millimeter of damage. Like I said, the rubber, though, it is just so thin that probably on grittier outdoor courts, you're still going to burn through it, right, just because there's not a lot of surface area. In terms of stopping power, the flange on this thing, which is, it's outsole rubber, because the outsole rubber comes up along the lateral side, but it is very long and also made of the midsole as well. So really long flange, a little more of a clip flange, but it's not super encumbering. So like I said, good stopping power, but also not really all that bulky and cumbersome, right? These definitely a little bit more streamlined than the 4s. So yeah, I mean, you can take them outdoors, kind of like the AG4. It's just not really meant for that. It's more, it's best suited for more of an indoor hardwood, vinyl, or rubberized court. All right, but let's get into the fit of these things. Now, number one, they do have a 15-degree inflare. That inflare is very distal, though. It's only 12 degrees to the midfoot, and then it gets to 15 degrees. So from the midfoot into the forefoot, it inflares another 3 degrees. So you don't really feel it, but there is definitely an inflare there. Now, in terms of length, they come in pretty standard, 28.8 centimeters of length, 9.5 centimeters of metatarsal width, 10.5 of toe box width, and then only a 25-degree taper. So actually, the toe box taper is a little bit more mellow. It's the inflare that is a little bit higher on these things. I didn't have any cramping at all on these. I broke these in pretty quick, and when you get them, like I said, the uppers are really, really substantial, and still really didn't have really any break-in. So I'd say narrow, medium foot. You can go true to size. If you are a narrow foot, I do think if you can get a half size, you can go down a half size in these as long as you're not super long-toed. Get a little bit of weight reduction, a little more of a glove-like fit. Like I said, medium 2, you can go true to size. A 4E, I think you can probably break them in true to size. It might take a minute to break them in for sure. But you know, I'd say if you can get these in a half size up, you can. If you want to go up one size and you're a long 4E, I think then that's fine. Might be a lot of shoe, but like I said, they lock down so well that doesn't really matter. No. So then going into the snake bitten foot, well, like I said with the lockdown, you can fit an orthotic in here really easily. So really for any type of snake bites on your foot, whether it be heel pain, ball of foot pain, ankle sprains, whatever, you know, these things are going to do really well. Arch strain, perineal tendonitis, posterior tibial tendonitis. Like I said, you can really fit whatever you want here. The bulkiest orthotic will still lock down into the shoe. So plus you've got 3 layers of foam underneath of you, and all of them kind of have their purpose, and they're all thoughtfully put in. So I would say really for anything you're bringing to the court, just like the AG4, they should be just fine. And in terms of the performance of these, I was, like I said, I was pleasantly surprised. They're actually really nice shoes for, you know, layups over and over and over again. They feel really forgiving underfoot. And to me, in terms of like, you know, a contained area, especially like my court here, it's a contained space, right? You don't have a lot of room. They were extremely nimble, a lot more, I'd say, relative to the AG4. They're still a pretty maximalist shoe, but they were, like I said, they definitely did have that feeling of ease of use and kind of nimble. You can just pop up off the ground pretty easily, and you can just kind of swing these shoes around kind of as you liked. So honestly, in terms of performance, pleasantly surprised on these things. They're not the AG4. They definitely feel a little bit different underfoot. To me, if I were going to buy one, I think I would probably get these ones. Number 1, plush tongue. Number 2, just kind of the overall fit. I really like the way the shank kind of runs in these. So I'd say they're very close. Some people are probably gonna like the 4s more than the 5s, but love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments down below. And if you do wanna see the shoe that honestly hasn't really been referenced as much in this video in terms of the AG line, is the AG4 Soar SE. If you wanna see that one go into the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.